This video is brought to you by AudioQuest, makers of the Dragonfly range of USB DACs. Click to AudioQuest.com for more information.
Should best of 2021 lists be restricted to products that were released in 2021 and maybe the back end of 2020? When I polled you fine people a few weeks ago, 66% of you said yes, which means if I want to include the Zoo Soul 6 in a best of whatever year list, I really have to do it this year. The Soul 6 are the red speakers that you see behind me. Now, audiophiles, they love to talk about live music being the reference by which we judge home stereo hi-fi system playback. I gotta say, I think that's a bit of a nonsense because I see them as two very distinct art forms. The other thing is as well, that's just talking about, or audiophiles are just normally talking about unamplified music, which then narrows our music genre choice down to a very narrow range. And most people, like me, when they go to a concert, they're listening to the band or the musicians through a PA system, through speakers in a venue, right? So you're asking, does my hi-fi system sound like those PA speakers? That's the question, right? And in most cases, the answer is not at all. So back to the Soul 6 from Zoo Audio. Sound, music leaps out of these speakers. Dynamics are way, way, way above average. Imaging is also way off the charts. The speakers really do disappear. When audiophiles talk about speakers disappearing, they don't mean it literally. They're talking about it metaphorically, in that it doesn't sound like music is coming from a right channel and a left channel. There is a sound stage that sort of almost ignores the fact that the speakers are there. So if you asked a little kid to point at where the sound was coming from, where they heard it coming from, they would hopefully point between the loudspeakers. That's how I hear the Soul 6. And these zoos also put a much wider throat on voices. What's really interesting is that these Soul 6 in their bass configuration, actually not this finish, I'll come back to that, sell for $6,000. Which is almost half the price of the Wilson Audio Tune Tots, which I also like very, very much. What's interesting is that the Zoo Soul 6 can go toe-to-toe with the Wilsons when it comes to detail retrieval. But the Zoo sound bigger, much bigger, in all directions. They produce this kind of monstrous sound. And that means that the Wilsons, I kind of pegged them as one of those speakers that audiophiles like to sit there in front of it, maybe at audiophile shows or the local audiophile society, and they'll sit there and they'll be either closing their eyes or they'll be stroking their chin. Yeah, this is like a really good, and their brow will be furrowed, and they'll be appreciating the sound maybe more than they'll be enjoying the music. So the Zoo are for people who really like to revel in the you are there feeling when listening to something like Talking Heads' Stop Making Sense, or Peter Gabriel Plays Live, or even Tripping with Niels Fram. In short, the Zoo are fun. Remember fun? So the Zoo Soul 6, for me, are closer to a scaled down version of a PA system than any other speaker that I've had in this house. And that means they're very strong with dynamics. They give us oodles of tonal colour, and they're lightning quick, but they're maybe not the last word in refinement, which I think the Wilson Tune Tot excel at. And also they're very strong on music's presence. So let's talk about why the Zoo speakers maybe sound like they do. Because they feature a 10-inch Eminence driver. Now this is not an off-the-shelf driver. This is apparently made to Zoo Audio specifications, and it runs full range inside the loudspeaker, all the way up to 10K, where it then sort of hands off to what I call a tweeter. It's coaxially mounted, but Zoo call it a super tweeter, I guess, because it's going from 10K upwards. And only that tweeter is high passed. So there's no filter, as far as I'm aware, applied to the 10-inch Eminence mid-bass slash high slash, upper mid-range driver. And that driver, I believe, is made from paper. The loudspeaker itself has a nominal impedance of 8 ohms, so reasonably standard. What isn't reasonably standard is its 99 dB efficiency, which means you could pretty much blow into the back of it and it would make a sound. It means you could use low-powered power amplifiers or integrated amplifiers, but basically don't need a lot of oomph from your amplifier to get these going. And in that sense, they're much closer to something like the Klipsch Forte or other speakers than pretty much any other speaker that I have in this house, including the Wilsons. Now, those of you who have been following my work for a long time will recall that I had a pair of Soul Mark II, I think it was, in Australia. I'm going back 6 years. These might look the same, but they are very much not. One of the key differences, I'm told, is that the internals have been completely reworked. The cabinet is no longer made from an MDF structure, it's made from Okame plywood. I think Sean Casey refers to this as superstructured in the way that it's built inside the cabinet. That's just to reduce the amount of energy that's lost into the cabinet, or some people call this cabinet torque. They are ported, but they're ported on the bottom. But it's not like a round port, it's 4 slits. There's more information about why that is the case on Zoo's website. I'm not covering it here. But these are all factors that clearly contribute to the Zoo's very lively and exuberant sound. But it's not only their sound that makes these loudspeakers my favourites of 2021. It's the way that they look. This particular pair come in a red high gloss. They are absolutely stunning to look at. This pair of Soul 6 really mainline the idea that speakers are furniture that play music. They really look like beautiful, beautiful pieces of furniture. And for me, that's what makes them the whole package. They don't necessarily look like, I mean, they obviously look like a speaker, but they look like no other speaker. They're only 82 centimeters high. They're just great to look at, even when no music is playing. And that for me is a sign of aesthetic success, is when you can appreciate the form and the finish of something, even when you're not using it. I mean, this is why that Alessi juicer that looks like an alien spacecraft is so incredible, right? I guess it's form and function that come together. I do that pretentious thing. You know, documentary makers do this. Now, their only gotcha, if there really is one, is that Zoo rate the Soul 6 as -3 dB down at 45 Hertz. So that means if you want to hear what's going on in the bottom octave, so 20 Hertz to 40 Hertz, you're going to need a subwoofer. Now, in sort of real life playback, I don't feel that the Soul 6 need a subwoofer, but when I put one in, I really appreciate what the subwoofer brings to the party. Now, that's especially true with something like Alvanoto's latest live album, which really benefits from the Zoo Soul 6's talents with micro-dynamic delivery. So that means we get to hear all the sort of clicks and crackles and hisses and pops that sort of are sprinkled into this audio mix, and that also play very stark contrast to the low end and somewhat subtle bass pulses. And in that sense, I think a subwoofer is really, really useful. Which then brings us to our next product of the year for 2021. We have seen a few micro subwoofers come to market this year, and I think they are transforming the landscape for subwoofers for hi-fi people, especially those who live in apartments like me, because you don't want a honking great like 10-inch driver subwoofer or 12-inch driver. For me, this sort of very small form factor is perfect for my lounge room. Now, I can't tell you with any authority or any reliability that the KEF KC62 is the best sounding micro subwoofer coming to market this year, because I've not heard its closest rival, the SVS Micro 3000. But I want to tell you why it's my favorite of this year and why actually it still might be best, especially if you're a KEF user. Now, we have to be careful with KEF's marketing materials here, because they say that the KC62 is only -3 dB down at 11 Hertz, but that it is also capable of 105 dB SPLs. And the thing to notice here is that no, it can't do 105 dB at 11 Hertz. These two do not coexist. It might be able to do 105 dB at a higher frequency, but not at 11 Hertz. So let's just get that cleared up, pretty much straight away. Now, what we do have inside are a pair of 500 watt Class D amplifiers driving a pair of 6.5-inch force cancelling woofers. And those voice coils on those drivers, on those woofers, are sleeved, which is how KEF managed to get the whole thing into a very small unit. And that sleeving is called Unicore, but KEF also have this thing called P-Flex. If you look at the edge of the driver, it is sort of concertinaed, and that's to sort of minimize driver distortions and flexing under high pressure loads. And also they have something called Smart Distortion Control, which uses DSP to correct for any kind of like spring back distortion that the drivers might introduce. Now, what I like about the KC62 sound is that it's very tight and very muscular. So it's not flabby or floppy, or it's not loose in the slightest. But what elevates the KC62 above the competition for me is how well it integrates with KEF's LS50 Wireless 2 streaming loudspeaker. In that, when you put the two together and you activate it in the app, you get a low-pass subwoofer output on the back of the speaker. But the internals inside the speaker also high-pass filter the UniQ driver on the front of the LS50 Wireless 2. And what that means is that it reduces that driver's low bass burden, which then means it's not having to work as hard to produce low bass, which means that the voice coil doesn't heat up as much, which means that there is a lower input impedance on that voice coil, which ultimately drives down distortion. At least that's the way it was explained to me by another reviewer. And that in turn puts less stress on the amplifiers inside the LS50 Wireless 2, right? But it goes further still, because you don't have to have a cable joining your LS50 Wireless 2 to your KC62 subwoofer. You can do it wirelessly using KEF's optional KW1 wireless transmitter receiver kit, which really helps positioning the subwoofer away from the speakers if you need to. And I don't know of any micro subwoofer coming to market this year that can do that, that can join wirelessly with a compatible pair of speakers and have those compatible pair of speakers high pass their main mid-bass driver. And this functionality, this advanced functionality, is why I'm awarding the KEF KC62 as one of the best products of 2021. I mean, yeah, best is such a poisonous word, but it's still one of my favorite products that I've reviewed this year. And in fact, I'll go further than that, because from a personal point of view, the KC62 has actually transformed the way that I listen to music. It's transformed the way I look at my priorities for a hi-fi system. You'll have heard me in recent videos talk about the room being the most important, then the loudspeakers, but number 3 is now subwoofers. So I think this is what I love about these little micros, is they allow more of us audiophile nerds, to get into low bass territory. The problem with subwoofers for many people, especially newcomers like me, is integrating them into a pair of passive loudspeakers with an amplifier. I mean, sure, we can use the preamp outs on the amp and feed that into the sub, but we still effectively have to design our own crossover. We have to set the crossover point on the sub, and then we have to set the gain, as well as the position of the sub. It is not easy to do this. But even if we do get our sub set up just nicely, just perfectly with our passive speakers, our fairly standard integrated amplifier, we still don't get the benefit of high-pass filtered mains. And that's where the Bluesound Powernode comes in. It's a small, streaming, all-in-one integrated amplifier, so it does Room Ready, Spotify Connect, Tidal Connect, it does Blue OS, it does AirPlay as well, it does Bluetooth. In fact, it does two-way Bluetooth, so you can send Bluetooth in, but you can pull Bluetooth out. It has 80 watts per channel of hybrid digital amplification. It has an ESS DAC circuit built in as well. It's the whole deal. It's everything all in one very, very tidy solution, and it gets us away from the sort of madness of having to compile your own separate system for actually not very much money at all. I think it sells for about £1,000, which I think is incredible for what this thing does as an all-in-one streaming amplifier. Now, as well as having a redesigned top touch panel, this Bluesound Powernode also has a very sophisticated internal bass management system. So if you have a pair of passive speakers like the Zoo Soul 6 and a subwoofer like the KC62, you can tell the Bluesound in the app to split the signal accordingly. You have to use an LFE output on the amp and go to the LFE input on the sub. And what the Bluesound does is it low passes the sub output, but it also high passes the loudspeaker outputs. The default is 80 Hertz, but I think you can go as low as 40 and as high as 200 Hertz for that crossover point. But the key thing here is that the subwoofer output is low passed and the loudspeaker outputs are high pass filtered, which takes the low frequency burden away from the loudspeakers, just as it did with the LS50 Wireless 2 and the KC62. So the Bluesound gives us a solution. If we have passive speakers, if we don't have the KEF streaming actives, we can still high pass filter our mains to get the benefits of less stress being put on them to do the low bass, because the sub's doing that anyway. I think this is just fantastic. So even if the Bluesound Powernode isn't the best sounding integrated amp at €1,000, and I don't know if it is or not, because that's the thing, no single reviewer is going to hear all of the power amplifiers or integrated amplifiers available at £1,000 to make a judgment as to which one is best, which is why best is a nonsense. Best is basically best of what I heard that year, and what you hear that year might be 10 things. If you do a product a week, it might be 50 things. Now, product a week is going pretty fast and only giving each product a fairly cursory listen, maybe 1-2 days, because you have to do that every week, right? So you're never going to get an overview. No reviewer on the planet has a complete overview of even a single category of products, because there just isn't the time. So we have to pick best as really meaning our favorites of the limited range of products we reviewed this year. So for me, the Bluesound Powernode is best, not because it's best sounding, I have no idea, but because it can integrate a subwoofer so beautifully. End of rant. So those are my 3 favourite products of 2021. The Zoosol 6, the KEF KC62 and the Bluesound Powernode. However, I do want to give an honourable mention to one other product, because one other problem of integrating a subwoofer is time alignment, because you might find that your bass is a little bit slow. Now, normally what you might do in that situation is bring the subwoofer further forward into the room, so closer to you in the listening position, so that you kind of increase its arrival time. However, that's not really very practical, especially if your bass is really slow and you have to put it like 2 meters in front of the speakers. That would be ridiculous. So what we need to be able to do is to delay the output on the mains. And we can do that with Room Perfect from Lyngdorf, which I used recently in the Lyngdorf TDAI-1120 amplifier. So let me be very clear here. I'm giving honourable mention to the Room Perfect software, not the Lyngdorf amp. Not that there's anything wrong with the Lyngdorf amp. It's just the fact that the software gives us advanced subwoofer integration features, like being able to specify which crossover we use, whether it's going to be Linkwitz, Riley or Butterworth, which order of crossover, and then also the time delay for the subwoofer and the time delay for the mains. We get all of these options. So if you want to kind of go beyond what the Bluesound Powernode can do, then maybe the Lyngdorf TDAI-1120 and its Room Perfect DSP subwoofer bass integration is for you. And let's not forget that Lyngdorf and that Room Perfect software also will cross over your mains with your sub, and then it will compensate the whole thing for the room. I think that's just marvellous. I think it's just fantastic. Just what a year to be alive in hi-fi, huh? So what we have here is a system-focused approach to Best of 2021. We've got a pair of passive loudspeakers, a subwoofer, and an amplifier that integrates the two. Or maybe another amplifier as well that integrates the two. But it's kind of an holistic approach. I've never done this before, but I thought it would be an interesting way to tackle Best of 2021. So yeah, if you like this video, please hit the like button down below. If you like my attitude towards high-end audio, please subscribe to this channel. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching, not just this video, but if you've watched other videos this year, thank you for watching those as well. And I want to wish you a fantastic holiday season. You can't say Christmas anymore, can you? So yeah, generic holiday season's greetings to you.